Before Stevie Wonder ever won a Grammy, before the legendary albums that reshaped soul, funk, and R&B, there was little Stevie Wonder, a blind 11-year-old musical genius from Saginaw, Michigan, with the harmonica in his pocket and rhythm in his soul. His pure talent and raw, unstoppable passion is the kind that moves through Motown hallways and into music history. From youthful novelty act to a fiercely independent artist with a vision no one could deny, he was a phenomenon in motion, the kind of motion that couldn't be taught. The kind that echoes through the Motown hallways and leaps out of studio sessions and stamps itself into the DNA of music history. At first, he was a kid who could sing, drum, play piano, and tear up a harmonica solo all in one breath, but even back then, under the Little Stevie label, there were flashes of something greater. A voice that refused to stay small. What started as youthful charm evolved into artistic brilliance, and over the next decade, Stevie would begin to shed the image others had created for him. From age 11 to 21, Stevie's journey was very much so about becoming the artist he was destined to be. He would score hits, experiment with sound, and navigate the pressures of fame. It's a decade of evolution, influence, and undeniable genius. So sit back, we're about to trace the early steps of a legend in the making. Hey yo, what's going on, guys? This is Kanoa Speaks. We're diving into the archives to bring you the moments from history that shaped the R&B and soul genres. Let's set the scene. In 1961, a chance meeting changed the course of music history. At just 11 years old, Stevland Hardaway Judkins, later known as Stevie Wonder, was introduced to Ronnie White of The Miracles, who was immediately blown away by the boy's talent. Ronnie brought him to Motown, and soon after, Stevie auditioned for Berry Gordy himself, and the verdict was an instant signing to Tamla label. And just like that, a legend was born, branded Little Stevie Wonder. But Motown didn't quite know what to do with him at first, though. Stevie wasn't just a singer, he was a full-blown instrumentalist and performer. He played harmonica, drums, piano, bongos, and he had a vocal tone far beyond his years. Motown's A&R team, including producer Clarence Paul, became key mentors during this early phase. Clarence helped shape Stevie's sound and stage presence, acting almost as a musical guardian. In 1962, his debut album, The Jazz Soul of Little Stevie, dropped, a mostly instrumental project that showcased his raw musical ability. Though it didn't make waves commercially, it was a statement. This kid wasn't a gimmick, he was a musician. That same year, he followed up with Tribute to Uncle Ray, a vocal album honoring Ray Charles, one of Stevie's idols and a fellow blind African-American artist. The project was more about positioning than originality, but it showed Stevie could hold his own vocally and even at such a young age. But the real breakthrough came in 1963 with the release of Recorded Live, The 12-Year-Old Genius, captured during a performance at Chicago's Regal Theater. The album featured a young Stevie tearing it up on stage with boundless energy, and the standout was Fingertips Part 2, a live improvised harmonica jam that exploded the charts. It became the first live recording to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and Stevie Wonder became the youngest artist ever to top that chart. Stevie Wonder was no longer just a novelty, but he was Motown's youngest star, and the world was officially watching. After the explosive success of Fingertips Part 2, Stevie Wonder had the world's attention. But now came the real challenge. What's next? At just 13, Stevie had already reached a peak many artists could only dream of. But with fame came pressure from the label, the public, and even himself. Motown always focused on shaping marketable stars, but they struggled to figure out how to package Stevie as he entered his teens. No longer the wide-eyed prodigy, but not yet the mature soul man he would become, Stevie was stuck in a transitional space. His voice was changing, his style was shifting, and so were his ambitions. During this period, Motown released a string of singles and albums that saw mixed results. Projects like Stevie at the Beach, 1964, and Uptight in 1966 were attempts to mold Stevie into a pop act while still appealing to R&B audiences. The Beach-themed album in particular was a clear reach, Motown trying to tap into the mainstream surf rock trend, but it didn't fit Stevie's identity or soul-driven roots. Still, he kept working, touring, recording, and sharpening his skills. Behind the scenes, Stevie was absorbing everything: the writing, the producing, the business. He started writing more of his own material, experimenting with melodies, rhythm, and lyrical ideas. His partnership with songwriter Sylvia Moy became crucial during this time. She believed in his artistry and helped guide him through the uncertainty of adolescence and vocal changes. In 1965, Motown took another big swing with Uptight, Everything's Alright, a gritty, high-energy track co-written by Stevie, Moy, and Henry Cosby. This was the spark Stevie needed. The song was a hit, reaching #3 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it marked a turning point. It was the first major single of his teen years, and importantly, it showed Stevie evolving into his own sound. The accompanying album, also titled Uptight, solidified that growth. Tracks like Nothing's Too Good for My Baby and his cover of Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind reflected a more thoughtful, socially aware Stevie. The boy wonder was becoming a young man with something to say. In 1966, Stevie was no longer just Motown's kid act. He was maturing, slowly gaining confidence and beginning to challenge the boundaries of what was expected of him. The seeds of independence were being planted. By the late 1960s, Stevie Wonder was stepping further out of the shadow of Little Stevie. He was now in his late teens, and the youthful charm that first made him famous had evolved into something deeper, a creative hunger. He wasn't just trying to make hits anymore. He was beginning to explore what it meant to be an artist. During this stretch, Stevie began flexing more of his songwriting muscles and asserting himself in the studio. Though Motown was still controlling much of the production and direction, Stevie was no longer content with just being told what to sing. He was writing, co-producing, and collaborating, testing the limits of what the Motown machine would allow. One of the key catalysts during this period was Syreeta Wright, a Motown secretary turned songwriter who would later become Stevie's wife. The two shared a creative bond, and Syreeta became a crucial influence on Stevie's musical and personal growth. Together, they began crafting songs that were more introspective and spiritual and emotionally rich. Stevie's albums during this time, I Was Made to Love Her in 1967 and For Once in My Life in 1968, showcased this shift. The title track from I Was Made to Love Her became one of his signature hits, reaching number 2 on the Hot 100. It was raw, energetic, and packed with emotional fire. Clear evidence that Stevie was beginning to tap into that sound that was uniquely his. The For Once in My Life album was another big step forward. Songs like the title track Shooby Dooby Doo Da Day revealed a Stevie who could blend pop appeal with soul grit. He was growing more confident, and more than ever, the emotion in his voice felt lived in. Tracks like My Cherie Amour, which he co-wrote during this time and released as a single in 1969, became instant classics, and further proof that Stevie wasn't just evolving, he was ascending. But creatively, he was still limited by the Motown system. Berry Gordy's tight control meant that most of the musical decisions were being made by the label, not Stevie, and that really frustrated him. He had ideas, bigger ideas. He wanted to experiment with sounds and synths, with social themes. He wanted to push boundaries, and as he approached his 20s, he knew that the time was running out on the original contract he had signed as a child. Behind the scenes, Stevie was preparing, studying, strategizing, meeting with lawyers, watching how the business worked. Because when he turned 21, he wasn't just planning to renew his deal, he was planning to redefine his career entirely. It was about his vision. Stevie Wonder was growing up. He was preparing for takeoff. As the 1970s began, Stevie Wonder was no longer a teenage sensation. He was a grown man with a sharpened perspective and a mind full of ideas. While Motown continued to release material rooted in the formula that had worked for years, Stevie's creative spirit was pulling him in new directions. He had spent the last few years learning the ins and outs of production, absorbing the business side of the music, and expanding his sonic palette beyond Motown's tried and true sound. In 1970, Stevie dropped the album Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, and something about it hit differently. The title track, which he co-produced, exploded onto the scene with fiery vocals and a grittier, funk-infused energy. Songs like Heaven Help Us All and Never Had a Dream Come True reveal a deeper emotional maturity, while his cover of the Beatles' We Can Work It Out showcased a growing interest in fusion genres and expanded his reach. But the real story during this period wasn't just on the charts, it was happening in the background. See, Stevie's original Motown contract was nearing its expiration date, set to end on his 21st birthday. Most Motown artists had little leverage when it came to creative control, but Stevie wasn't approaching this like business as usual. And I have recorded a video on that. You can go check that out on my channel. But he had been quietly preparing, surrounding himself with a small circle of advisors, lawyers, and producers who would help him take ownership of his career. He was particularly inspired by the way artists like Marvin Gaye were starting to push back against the Motown mold. Gaye's bold move with What's Going On showcased that there was room for artistry and activism within the mainstream black music, which I have also made a video on. You can go check that out as well. But Stevie, too, had something to say, and he wanted the tools to say it his way. During this time, he also began experimenting with synthesizers and new technology, working with electronic pioneers Malcolm Cecil and Robert Margouleff, who had developed the Tonto synthesizer system. And these sounds were wild, futuristic, and totally unlike anything Motown had ever put out. But to Stevie, they had opened a door to musical freedom. He was already sketching the blueprints for a new sound that would change everything. So as he moved closer to his 21st birthday in May 1971, Stevie wasn't simply just renegotiating his record deal. He was more so preparing to walk into the next phase of his life as a composer, as a producer, and with full creative control. The boy who once sang Fingertips on a stage in a suit and sunglasses was now a man ready to reshape the sound of black music. Motown had given him the platform. Now he was about to take the reins. On May 13, 1971, Stevie Wonder turned 21, and with that birthday came a seismic shift in his life and career. For the first time, his contract he had signed as a child was officially his to walk away from, or to renegotiate on his own terms. and Stevie had no intention of stepping back into the same arrangement. He came to the table not as an artist pleading for freedom, but as a visionary ready to claim it. Armed with legal knowledge, a growing understanding of publishing rights, and an arsenal of unreleased music, Stevie entered negotiations with Berry Gordy and Motown like a man with a master plan. He temporarily stepped away from the label, creating music independently in a New York studio while exploring new technologies and sounds. What they were building wasn't bound by Motown's traditional studio practices. It was innovative, experimental, and undeniably futuristic. During this stretch of creativity, Stevie recorded what would become his transitional album, Where I'm Coming From. His first project entirely written and produced by him and Sarita Wright. Released on April 1971, just weeks before his birthday, the album served as both a message and a warning shot. It was soulful, political, introspective, and laced with social commentary. Tracks like Do Yourself a Favor, Think of Me as Your Soldier, and Never Dreamed You'd Leave in the Summer peel back layers of Stevie's soul, revealing a man no longer interested in playing by anybody else's rules. Critics were mixed, but the intentions behind the album was undeniable. Stevie was no longer being Motown's golden boy. He wanted ownership. Ownership of his music, ownership of his publishing, his message, and his legacy. The tone had really shifted. He wasn't seeking approval anymore. He was staking his claim as a self-directed artist. Eventually, Stevie renegotiated his Motown contract, but this time with revolutionary terms, full of artistic control and a larger royalty rate, something virtually unheard of for black artists at that time, especially one so young. It was a declaration. Stevie wasn't just here to follow trends, he was here to set them. By the end of 1971, Stevie was free, not in theory, but in practice. He had the tools, the team, and the vision to carve out the next era on his own terms. And what came next were the masterpieces, the Grammys, the classics that would bend time and genre. But it all started here, with a young man who dared to break the chains and bet on himself. It wasn't the end of an era. It was the birth of a legend in full control of his destiny. Cheers.